Welcome once again to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Meyers. We're here every week meeting interesting people, dealing with topical issues. And today, a topic that really touches each and every one of us at one time or another.
Yes. We're going to talk about, in particular, the effect of our life today, the effect it's having on children and youth, particularly from the standpoint of anxiety and depression. And we have gotten the very best expert there is in Oklahoma and maybe beyond to come talk to us about that. Deborah Shropshire has been on our show once before. She is a person that I have dealt with over the years and still deal with regularly.
Should be enlightening.
Yeah, it really will be.
We'll be right back. You're watching The Verdict.
Right now, 6 feet can feel like a long ways away. But from 6 feet, we can still smile at each other. From our doorways and our stairways, from opposite sides of the street and opposite sides of the country. Through fear and frustrations, we can remind each other that we are still here for each other. Because we can still smile at each other. And we're not going anywhere.
Military service ran in my blood, starting from my father, which joined the Navy, on the Chickasaw side, my uncle, which served in the United States Army. I'm Benjamin Espinosa, Chief Petty Officer, United States Navy, and I'm Chickasaw. I went to the Secretary of Defense's staff at the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., which ultimately led to becoming a combat support technician for Naval Special Warfare, specifically SEAL Team 10. I think to be proud and to love your tribe, to love being Chickasaw, you also have to love being American. You also have to love everything that America stands for. Equality, perseverance, professionalism, and power. I want my family to know that their father is a good person, but also feels that he has an obligation to the country and to love this nation. Anything worth having is worth dying for. The military and the country owes me nothing. I owe it everything.
See more stories about the Chickasaw people at profilesofanation.com.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Meyers, and Kent's going to introduce today's guest.
We are really pleased today to have a friend and a very qualified person to talk to us about a very difficult subject, anxiety and depression prevalent in the youth community today. Dr. Deborah Shropshire is our guest, and Deb has been on the show one other time, did a Zoom show then. We've got her in studio now. She is a pediatrician. She is a doctor at Children's Hospital, has been there 21 years and is still there seeing patients, while at the same time she is the Child Welfare Director for Department of Human Services. So she has enormous responsibility in two areas, and she carries them out in an exemplary fashion. I have seen people come and go in those positions, and she is by far at the top of the list. She's going to talk to us today about depression and anxiety in youth. Deborah, glad to have you back.
Thank you both for having me. It's good to be here.
You know, it does seem like we're hearing more about children having a tough time coping with one thing or another. I probably won't use the right term that you would use professionally. So help me here, deal with this subject of why does it seem like children are not coping with the 21st century as well as generations may have in the past?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Probably has a lot of different answers. One thing that we are not surprised by, I don't think over the last couple of years, is just the enormous amount of stress that the COVID pandemic has placed on all kinds of people, and why we would imagine that kids would be any less affected, I don't know. And so kids are clearly affected by all just the chaos and disruption of life over the last couple of years. But we also know that even preceding COVID, that there was, for easily the decade or maybe even 15 years prior to COVID, a gradual increase in things like teen suicide attempts and some of those things that we measure to determine how kids are doing. That it's not totally clear what all of that's related to, but certainly is a crisis in our country.
Well, we can see the national news or the local news with stories about it, but you see it every day, do you not? Or every time you're doing your rounds at the Children's Hospital, because you still see patients on a daily basis. What do you observe as being different, if anything, from maybe 5 years ago?
Yeah. I think, again, boy, what COVID has done this last couple of years is exacerbated problems that existed really before in ensuring that we have the kinds of services, outpatient and hospital type services, to support families and kids who face these challenges. As we, as healthcare systems, have moved to serve kids in their home as opposed to in hospitals where they might have been in the past, I think we have some room to continue to try to build the kinds of services we're going to need for those kiddos that do have some complex challenges. I also think the world, I mean, I have a mom of a couple of teenagers. Their world is more complicated than mine was when I was growing up. As far as the different decisions that they have to make, the challenges they may have with school relationships or bullying or different kinds of things. I don't know if that's awareness, that they're more aware of some things than we were, or if life is just more complicated. I think some of the complexity of life, social media, even the wonderful things about the internet and social media are there, but there are also some real challenges in how kids relate to each other. And how we all relate to each other that I think are playing out in terms of mental health of our youth.
Well, I think it's true that kids have more access to information today than they might have 10 years ago or longer. But that doesn't necessarily mean they know how to cope with that information any better. Those skills may be developed along a time continuum. Discuss, and I'm tricking you with this question because I didn't tell you we were going to ask it, but how does a child develop from the standpoint of mentally being able to handle difficult situations over a timeline from a very young age to teen years? Yeah,
that's a great question, and I would actually carry it even beyond teen years into the early young adulthood. So we know that babies are born with a very basic amount of brain development, and as their brain is developing and maturing from infancy all the way through childhood, adolescence, and into early adulthood, they're learning how to respond to circumstances in their environment, and they're taking a lot of cues from their parents or from the people who are taking care of them initially, and then as they get more independent into school or other environments, from the other adults that are and kids that are around them. And so there's a constant experiencing and learning that's happening. And in most of us, for many of us, we're going to face moments of adversity. Our family might face the loss of family members, or we might face a move to a new town or a new school. And those are, in a sense, adversities that kids, as long as the environment around them is responding pretty well to those, kids learn through those. You learn how to make new friends. You learn how to go on forward with life even while you may be dealing with some losses. There are some kinds of adversities that kids face, families face, that are actually really toxic even to the brains of kids, including things like we tend to see in the child welfare system, sometimes unfortunately abuse or neglect, kiddos who don't have adequate nutrition so their brain can't actually even develop properly, families who have a great deal of instability or interpersonal violence in their family. So there are some experiences that actually don't help you develop, or they help you develop in the wrong ways. There are a lot of other experiences that are common to us that help us mature and learn how to deal with change in life. And that happens, throughout really the first 2 to 3 decades of our life. And then those patterns are kind of set for how we're going to live. So it's a lot to do with your environment, your family, who takes care of you, and then ultimately your friends and other relationships as you're moving into school and other environments that plays out in that development. And when something happens, if the feedback you get is, you're okay, you're safe, you can make it through this, we as a family are here together, then you can face the next adverse thing that happens, and typically mental health stays pretty good. If, on the other hand, the feedback that you get is, you're not good enough, we're not okay, you're not safe, those things can sometimes be really, really challenging for folks as they face future adversity, if that makes sense.
One of the challenges that parents face is, at what age should their child be exposed to something new? And it might be social media, it might be having their own telephone. What advice do you have to parents about when their child might be ready? Because chances are the child is wanting it. You know, they're
Right.
being pushed, and maybe their cousin already has it. And what advice do you have should you wait longer? Should you wait sooner? What communication is good?
Well, I'm just going to tell you, if you ask 10 people, you get 10 different answers on that. So you just have to know that. Even pediatricians, you get 10 different answers. I think, certainly pediatricians for a long time have said, hey, screen time a little bit of screen time is fine, but you really learn how to do social interactions and those things that are healthy for brain development interpersonally, not on a screen. And so while screen time is okay, a little bit of it's okay, we really want, especially young children, toddlers, young children growing up in a more of a face-to-face interaction, play, and environment. As time goes on, kids are typically exposed to more screen time. And I think for older kids and youth, the question for parents becomes, is it healthy? So are the interactions that my kiddo is having online, are they healthy interactions? Are they bullying kinds of interactions? Are they learning? So, we've had so many kids over the last couple of years spending hours on a screen because they're doing virtual class. I don't think that will completely change. My own kiddo right now does half in person and half virtually, and it's because she has more elective options if we have virtual school. So I think the idea that the use of screens or the use of technology for some really positive things to help kids develop is here to stay. The question, I think, as parents is also, is it helping my young person, helping my kiddo, or is it harmful? Is it keeping them from forming real relationships with actual humans? or is there actually even something even worse? Bullying online, comparison. We all get online and compare our vacation to everybody else's vacation, or our life to everybody else's Facebook life. How is my child responding to that online environment? And really thinking through, in a sense, each individual child's needs, but also their resilience as well.
Dr. Deborah Shropshire is the Child Welfare Director for DHS. We'll be right back with more.
We want to reach out to every veteran we can in Oklahoma. There's somewhere around 340,000 veterans here in Oklahoma, and half of those are still unaware of their benefits or don't know how to go about getting them.
We help guide the veterans through the VA system. It's a giant maze, and we kind of help guide them through that maze. So our job is to try to help the veterans get everything that they're legally entitled to. There's just a special place in my heart for our Vietnam veterans and our World War II veterans, as well as any veteran, and that's why I do the job.
OU Law has a history and heritage that are unparalleled. At the University of Oklahoma College of Law, we empower our students to pursue the career of their dreams. We have the highest U.S. News ranking ever achieved by an Oklahoma law school. We are the first law school in the country to launch a college-wide digital initiative. And this year, our competition teams rank #2 in the nation. OU Law, generations of excellence, limitless possibilities.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. We're discussing youth anxiety and depression. with Dr. Deborah Shropshire of the Department of Human Services.
Deb, talk to us about what is generically called, I guess, the emergency room crisis insofar as youth is concerned.
Yeah, so there's definitely been sort of what's been viewed as a crisis of the number of children who have accessed emergency rooms, primarily at children's hospitals, but not just there, also in all kinds of communities, for mental health needs. And often those mental health symptoms that are presenting are around symptoms related to depression and anxiety. Depression tends to look more like situations where people are kind of hopeless or in despair, combined with symptoms that, such as not being able to find something I enjoy doing. So if you think about a kiddo who's generally down, really maybe sad for a prolonged period of time, may feel like their life isn't even worth living, and you can't find anything that they previously enjoyed that they want to engage in, those would be typical symptoms of depression. And on the anxiety side, it tends to look more like kids who may be having panic attacks or who may be having a lot of kind of anxious thoughts, hard to concentrate. You think about trying to do school when you have either one of these sets of symptoms and trying to focus on learning. That is certainly made much harder for both depression and anxiety. Some people have symptoms more on the depression side, others more on the anxiety side, and many people actually have both, depending on the day and the circumstance. And almost all of these symptoms occur not only in your mind, but your mind's actually attached to your body, so they come out in your body too. And for kids, that may look like not engaging in things, laying around, sleeping all the time or not sleeping, eating a lot or not eating, being irritable and cranky. So parents may actually perceive that their kid is just crabby, and actually what they're seeing is depression. Anxiety may manifest as racing heart, or it's hard to breathe, or some of these other kinds of symptoms. So parents may show up in the emergency room because they've got this kiddo who's having these symptoms. They may not be quite clear what they even are. And when those symptoms are severe, they can actually result in a situation where kiddos present as suicidal or at risk of trying to harm other people around them or threatening other people. And that necessitates the emergency room then trying to figure out how to deal with this. The American Academy of Pediatrics, the Child Psychiatry National Organization, as well as the Children's Hospital National Organization came together in October of 2021 and issued a brief that called this a crisis in emergency rooms in children's hospitals because of the large number of children who are showing up with these symptoms, children and youth. Yeah.
What does treatment look like? Are there 3 solutions or 103 solutions? What does a doctor do when they're presented with a child who's exhibiting some of these behaviors?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's not 3, but there's also not 103. It's probably a cluster of a handful of things. I think initially we're trying to make sure that kiddos are safe and that they understand and their family understands what's happening and what it's going to take to keep them safe. So safety is by far the first question of how do we make sure you're safe. Then beyond that, we're going to look at things such as under what conditions might counseling be a benefit. Certainly our state actually has quite a pretty good array of counselors for children and youth, and our Department of Mental Health has done a lot of work over the years to try to increase the knowledge even of therapists in the state of Oklahoma around youth mental health. There also may be, for some kids, a need for medication to help to intervene with symptoms of depression or anxiety. But also there's other kinds of things such as helping families understand how to support their young person. Sometimes families may not have recognized, especially if they're busy or dealing with some of their own kind of challenges, they may not have recognized that kiddo was struggling with those symptoms. So even the family becoming aware and then giving families ways that they can then really engage with their kiddo and help engage them in other activities or things like that can actually be helpful. Also, sometimes we also just need neighbors and faith communities and groups like that to wrap around these kids and these families and help the kids remember that they have value and purpose here, that they're not alone or isolated. Depression and anxiety can be very isolating conditions, can make you feel like you're by yourself. And the current sort of world that we're living in is a little bit that way already. And so as community members, even just helping kids connect with who's in your world that you can hang out with, that you can spend time with, or that's checking on you, those are actually things that can really help as well. But certainly from a treatment standpoint, we're going to look to counseling and look to family safety and look to medications as kind of the bulwark, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Let me ask, assuming a parent or parents recognize in their child something that's different, something that is worrisome, troublesome to them, be it anxiety or depression, what is the first stop? What is the first action a parent ought to take outside the home?
Yeah, so I would absolutely recommend a first stop being talking to, whether that's, if there's a counselor who's already involved with that family, or say a school counselor, school teachers. School is a great place to engage quickly, to say, hey, here's what I'm seeing, what are you all seeing, and to get some help. Many schools do have counselors on their staff that aren't just doing testing or other kinds of things. They're actually doing treatment of some kiddos who may be in the school system. Also, your physician, primary care provider, pediatrician, whoever it is that provides medical care, those folks are definitely trained to listen to the concerns of parents and then help walk through, is this something more serious or something that we can sort of manage in a different way? We use a lot of standardized screening tools in medical offices for depression, anxiety, et cetera, that really help us sort out the seriousness of the situation and the proper diagnosis, because in kids sometimes it's not easy to tell.
Well, in the urban-rural situation, an urban situation might make those types of help events easier to come by. In the rural, it may not be quite so easy, but on the other hand, most rural locations have schools.
Yeah.
And that was one of the first things you mentioned. I presume that they ought to try to explore what's available in their own community before moving outside their community.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the Department of Mental Health and others have connectors to local resources, so you can get on the website and say, hey, I'm in this town and who can I connect with. But I have a great deal of respect for the work that schools do in this space. I think the school systems across our state have learned a lot about child and adolescent mental health. They've learned a lot about trauma and even the adversities I was talking about earlier that are sometimes really overwhelming to kids, and have responded to that. And I think right now schools are really trying very, very hard to respond to the mental health needs of kiddos. And so I think that's actually a great place to start in addition to healthcare providers.
DHS having trouble hiring people in these days. Any solutions there?
We have a lot of things we're trying around hiring. The truth of the matter is, I think, I'm seeing articles every day about how many industries are having trouble hiring, and including the mental health space. And so there is perceived to be a sort of lack of therapists. If you go out to the community mental health centers and things like that, they're saying, hey, we've got job postings and we don't have applicants. So I think we are in a space where the whole field is in need of more staff. And it's going to be really critical that we continue to train people. We continue to be creative about recruiting and hiring folks to Oklahoma who can serve our kids.
About 30 seconds left. What can people at home do?
Well, the first thing they can do is look around them in their own home, if they have children or youth in their own home, if they're teachers in their own classrooms, if they're Sunday school teachers, or wherever they are, there are children and youth. Look around and intentionally ask yourself, how are kiddos doing? And then take the next step of depending on what your kind of role is, how can I help? That could be reaching out to a professional. It could also be serving as a mentor or just checking on kids.
It's been a great show. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Thanks, Deb.
Thanks
we
for having
appreciate
me.
it.
Dr. Deborah Shropshire has been our guest. She is the Child Welfare Director for DHS. And Kent and I'll have a final word when we get back.
It used to be okay in teachers' lounges. It used to be okay in maternity wards. It was okay in sporting arenas, college campuses, and office spaces. But now that we understand the deadly dangers of secondhand smoke, that's not okay anymore. So why is it okay that thousands of employees are exposed to it every day at work? Bottom line, it's not okay. Let's protect hardworking Oklahomans. Join the fight at stopswithme.com.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
I think for us, once we got started and we began to see the tremendous need just within our state, it really was just a calling for us. The blessings far outweigh any obstacles that we've faced.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Deborah gave us a lot to think about on anxiety and depression involving children.
Well, she really did, and she works with it every day. We just couldn't hardly have had a better guest. And she does excellent work, not only with the Department of Human Services, but out at Children's Hospital as well. We're lucky to have her in our realm. And
if parents out there think they need help in this area, they probably do.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you follow your instincts. Website information about Deborah, oklahoma.gov/OKDHS. That's oklahoma.gov/OKDHS. We have a website, theverdict.tv. Head there, and we'll see you next week right here on The Verdict.